How the Church Fails Businesspeople was written as a study guide. It's a slim book, really as a study guide that could be used in a small group or in a Sunday school class or in one's personal devotional time. So we begin with part one of the book that takes us through a thought process as to why it is that the church has been so disconnected from our economic lives. And I've examined that by looking at some of the forces in the world of business that may drive the two worlds apart. I've looked at some of the theological traditions and trends in the church that have kept business considerations outside of church. I've also looked at the church's uneasy relationship with money and our inability to articulate a coherent doctrine of money. And I've thought about why is it that the church finds this topic so difficult and so hard to reach any agreement about. I've also looked at the tendency that we have in our own lives to divide our lives into sort of public and private spheres, to separate our public lives from our private lives, and in some ways to create a comfort level with leaving our faith at home, because it's frankly more difficult at times to bring it with us to work. And then in part two, I've tried to turn our attention to what do we need to do to bring these two worlds together. And in that section of the book, we begin by looking at rethinking our doctrine of vocation, understanding that vocation as Christians simply means discipleship, that our call as Christians is to be disciples in every area of life where we find ourselves. A vocation is not a job. And I think in the church we've often made the mistake of creating a hierarchy of vocations where those who serve the church in professional full-time ministry or work as missionaries, or even those who work in the helping professions like nursing, are held up as examples of people who've been called to their work. And yet we seldom talk about the call of the barber to the barber shop, or the call of the bookkeeper to the accountant's job. I think it's important for us to understand that the vocation of the Christian is not a job, it is a way of life. It is a life of discipleship. We move from there into thinking about a moral theology for work. What are we really called to do as disciples in our workplaces? What does it mean to be a Christian in public life? And we think about the call that we have to do justice, to love kindness, to walk humbly with God, and ultimately, and most importantly, to love others. And what are the implications of that for those of us who go to work in occupations day to day where it's not always easy to love other people, where it's not always easy to find relevance for those teachings? How do we make that relevant? And then we turn our attention in the 7th chapter to a workplace awakening, the ways that lay people throughout the country and indeed around the world have established ministries and organizations of their own to meet this need. Small groups, study groups, Bible studies, large organizations that cut across entire professions, that bring people together to think together and learn together about how their faith applies to their work. And I'm suggesting that the church has something to learn from those organizations. And then finally, in the last chapter, we talk a little bit about some of the things that the church needs to be thinking about today in order to bring about greater coherence between our faith lives and our work lives. And so I hope this study guide will be helpful to you. I hope it'll prompt some good conversation. I don't expect you to agree with everything that I've asserted here, but I think it will give you something good to talk about and maybe some new questions to ask as you continue your own faith journey in connecting your own faith to your work.